You will never believe what happened in this story about Thor. No movies, no comics, nothing comes even close to this adventure of the mighty god. It's almost impossible to fathom to what extremes Thor is willing to go just to retrieve his mighty hammer. Thor. We all know him, and we certainly all love him. But the Thor who's portrayed in the movies isn't really the same Thor that exists in the Norse mythology. As you might know, Thor is the god of thunder, but that's not all. He's also associated with the sky and with agriculture. He's the son of Odin and Jord, who is probably a personification of the earth. But contrary to popular belief, he's not the brother of the trickster god Loki. And before the ladies and even some gentlemen start asking, sorry, Thor's already taken by none other than the goddess Sif, with whom he has his son Modi and his daughter Thrud. His other son Magni might be the kid of Thor, surprise surprise, and a giantess. You're probably asking yourself, wow, Thor seems to be popular with the ladies. I always knew he was a real Chad, but how does he actually look like? Well, again, the movies tricked you. Generally speaking, Thor rocks red hair and has a powerful beard. He's also known for his mighty hammer, which has the lovely name Mjolnir. Now, this hammer is very functional. Mjolnir was forged by dwarfs, and so it has some extremely handy attributes. As you might expect, it is fantastic for smashing his enemies. And it is both a short distance and a long distance weapon, because the hammer can actually return to the thrower just like a boomerang. But it is also capable to hollow things and people. This is extremely useful because Thor doesn't need to do any groceries.
Confusion of the highest order.
Let me explain. Thor is the proud owner of a chariot, which is drawn by two goats. He can basically kill and eat his own two helpers and resurrect them afterwards if he gathers all the bones and hollows them. But the bones have to remain unbroken, because otherwise his goats will have the same bones broken when they come back to life. His other significant items are his belt, which doubles his strength, and his iron gloves that help the god to wield his mighty hammer. So now you probably want to know,
Thor.
What is your profession?
I am so glad you asked.
Thor functions as the protector of Asgard, which is the realm of the gods, and he also defends Midgard, aka the human realm. His foes are none other than giants, who are basically the enemies of the gods. The funny thing is that Thor himself is 3/4 a giant, because his father Odin is basically half a giant, and his mother Jord is 100% a giantess. But Thor's arch-nemesis is the world serpent Jormungandr, which is basically a giant snake. They both share the same cruel destiny. During the events of Ragnarok, which is basically the end of the world, Thor and Jormungandr fight to the bitter end. After an insanely brutal battle, Thor was able to kill the great serpent with his mighty hammer, but he pays a huge price for his victory. He manages to walk only 9 steps before he finally collapses and dies due to the snake's poison. As you can see, Thor is thought to be a mighty warrior, and in fact, during the Viking Age, he was actually the god who was asked for help whenever the warriors went to war. But he was also the god of choice when it came to agriculture, because of his association with the sky and his protective attributes. People thought that asking Thor for help would produce more rain, which would result in more fertility on the fields. Well, to be honest, he was asked for help in basically any aspect of life. Let it be consecrating marriages, success on the battlefield, or even sealing business contracts, Thor was always viewed as the god of the common man. But why did the mythological Thor lose his prominence? Well, even though variations of Thor go back as far as the Bronze Age, he eventually disappeared as one of the primary gods of Scandinavia. The reason for this is the introduction of Christianity in Scandinavia around the 10th century. The Christians wanted to force their beliefs upon the Scandinavian people, and the fact that Thor was viewed as a rival of Christ himself resulted in severe conflicts. But eventually, the Christians got the upper hand and succeeded in their endeavor, and by the 12th century, Thor was finally replaced. But let's take a look at one specific story about Thor, which I'm pretty sure most of you have never heard before. It all begins with our protagonist waking up, but something is off. Thor looks around and then he realizes what's wrong. His hammer Mjolnir is gone, his face is like thunder, and his blood is boiling. Filled with rage, Thor immediately starts to think that the trickster and shape-shifting god Loki is the one who wronged him. He comes to see Loki, but the god denies the accusations. Instead, he tells Thor that he might know who the real thief is. Loki informs Thor that a Jotun named Thrymr is behind it. The two gods team up and want to get Freya's help as well. The goddess of fertility agrees to support the duo and lends them her cloak of falcon feathers, which allows the one who's wearing it to take the form of a bird and to fly. Loki puts the cloak on and flies to Jotunheim, where he meets Thrymr. The trickster god gets the thief to admit to his crime, but he's only willing to give the hammer back if he gets something in return. And the Jotun asks for nothing less than to marry the beautiful Freya. Later, Loki informs Thor about the thief's demands, and they try to convince the goddess to help them by putting on the bridal headdress. But she feels utterly insulted by this preposterous idea and declines angrily. Plagued by desperation, the gods of Asgard organize a meeting and try to find a solution. The odds of getting Mjolnir back appear to be very slim. But eventually, the god Heimdallr suggests that Thor should pretend to be Freya and put on the dress in order to get in close proximity of his hammer. The god of thunder is absolutely baffled and is totally against this ridiculous idea. But Loki manages to convince Thor to give it at least a try and even suggests to pretend to be Thor's bridesmaid. Can you imagine their conversation while they get dressed? Loki's probably like, you know, you look actually quite nice. In fact, you're almost as pretty as Freya herself, sir. And Thor, who fell in love with his feminine side, responds,
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
and just like that, the two travel to Jotunheim. There, things don't go quite as planned as you might imagine. Thor starts to eat absurd amounts of food and washes it down with even more beer. Thrymr finds it odd but also amusing. Loki tries to justify Thor's behavior by saying that Freya hasn't eaten in days. The party continues, but eventually the thief intends to kiss his soon-to-be wife. He slowly lifts the veil and sees two extremely terrifying eyes. Loki quickly provides an explanation by saying that Freya hasn't slept for days because of her sheer excitement. And once again, the trickster god manages to calm the situation down. And when it's time to present the wedding gifts, Thor finally gets a hold of his hammer and then he totally destroys all of the guests, including Thrymr. This is just one of many great stories about Thor. And thanks to movies and comics, the god of thunder is still remembered to this very moment. And on every Thursday, which originates from the words Thor's Day, he is still celebrated and honored. I really hope you enjoyed this video. And if you have any wishes for future video topics, then feel free to share your ideas in the comment section below. Have a great day, and until next time.